really happy for you. That's amazing. I also want to, since I'm sitting on the East Coast where we are likely to have rain again at any moment, I also want to acknowledge that some of you that are out on the West Coast, you're dealing with some profound issues. And so know that our hearts are with you and that our hearts go out to you and that we're praying for your rain as much as we can. And that we all learn what we need to learn from where we are. So I'm Byron Ballard. I guess I should have started there. And I am the village witch of Asheville, North Carolina, and that's where I'm talking to you from today. I am sitting in my living room, and the windows are open, and there's a little bit of a breeze coming in. We're setting into fall here, and it will be here in its beautiful array of colors very soon. I'm here to talk to you today and to share with you today a little bit about my own culture and the healing modalities of this culture, and also to tie it in to the larger, as I think of it, the larger Appalachian diaspora. This region has had the misfortune for a long, long time of pretty severe poverty, and people leave the area in droves sometimes to find work so they can feed their families. We are probably one of the most misunderstood regions of the country. And so I hope after today, you will have reasons to think kindly of the region and to consider visiting us at some point. Though, though visiting right now is hard because of the pandemic and everything else. So we're going to talk about healing. I'm going to talk about my culture, but I invite you now to take a really deep, deep breath and really try to set aside for yourself all the things that are weighing you down, the grieves of the grief that you hold, the people for whom you are worried or concerned, the overall concern we all feel for where we are as a nation right now. So set that down if you would, just for now. In fact, rub your hands together, get some friction going, and hold them out flat like this, palms up, and let the grief and the worry, and maybe some of the anger too, flow into your hands. And then turn your palms down and let it just sit there on the floor and wait for you. You can pick it back up when we're finished, but I'd advise you not to pick it back up at all and let your healing today begin with that. So I have written several books. I'm going to go through those first. I put a note in the chat about how you can reach me and to order books from me if you choose to. And my website is www.myvillagewitch.com. And you can send me an email there or talk to me in whatever ways you'd like there. I have 3 books on Appalachian folkways. 2 early ones are called Staubs and Ditchwater, and the second is called Aspidity and Madstones, and I'm going to read you a tiny bit from that at the end. I have a new book on Appalachian folkways coming out from Llewellyn in February of next year called Roots, Branches, and Spirits, The Folkways and Witchery of Appalachia. I have another book coming out, this time from Wiser, next summer, and that is a book on deepening your personal spiritual practice through animism and following the cycle of the seasons. I have a book on loving your body to health and fitness called Embracing Willendorf. And I have a book that came out 2 years ago called Earthworks. And that is a book that talks about, it's essays about where we are right now in our culture, where we are in the decline of Western civilization, if that doesn't sound too pompous, and how we can create ceremony and ritual around the things that happen to us so that they become an intentional and often healing modality. So those are the books I've written. I am on all the social media that I care to be on. Facebook, both as Byron Ballard and as Village Witch a Wanderin'. I am maxed out in friends at Byron Ballard, so please feel more than welcome to follow me there or to go to my other page, Village Witch a Wanderin'. I do Instagram where I post pictures mostly of plants and funny things in my neighborhood. And then I am occasionally on Twitter, though I don't engage too much. It's not good for my blood pressure, to be honest. So here we are together. And we are all over the place, I imagine. If you all want to pop into the chat and tell me where you're sitting right now, I'd love that. But it's been the blessing and the boon of this year when so many of us who normally travel everywhere have been home. I mean, I've had the best garden I've had in years because I've been here to tend it, to both plant it and tend it. Oh, Seattle, Holly Springs, Denver. Oh, hi. Hi, everybody. Washington, West Virginia. Oh, thank you all so much. Beautiful. But we're here to talk about where we are in a time where healing and health and what that means encompasses so many things. Obviously, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Many of y'all on the West Coast are in the midst of huge fires. Those in the middle of the country, incredible rains and winds. And down along the Gulf Coast, they're waiting for another storm that's coming in and should hit New Orleans, I think, sometime Tuesday. So wherever you are, weather, and much of that based on the out of control climate change we are experiencing, weather is something to take not only into account, but to understand that our being resilient in the face of it is all up to us. So when we talk about healing, I want to invite you to think that healing is not just patching up a wound, that we are in a place now with so much division, so much hatred in this country, that we need to broaden the notion of healing. It's not just getting ourselves and our families through a pandemic or out of a riot situation or out of and I'm going to back up the word riot, out of a situation where our expressions of justice are met with expressions of another kind. There is so much going on. And I'm going to go over what is specifically Appalachian stuff. So I'm going to talk about some herbs and some different protocols we do. But I'm inviting you to think of healing in a broader sense. That healing, the word heal, comes from the same root as the idea of being made whole. And that when we are unwell, we are not only sick in body, mind, spirit, we are also not whole to ourselves. And I think our species has battled for so long with spiritual systems that don't serve us, and we still are battling many of those. And we are battling things that are often beyond our immediate control. So in addition to talking about bloodroot tincture, and I'll do my whole elderberry evangelist gig for y'all. In addition to all of that, creating strong woven communities will take us a long way towards the kind of healing that we need, not only as individuals and families, but as a culture, or as a set, as I like to think of as a set of interlocking cultures. So we're going to talk about that too. And please forgive my voice kind of coming and going, but here on the East Coast, it is ragweed season. And if I don't sneeze and cough, you will be very lucky, because the sneezing, I got to tell you, the way I sneeze is a symphonic. So we will hope that doesn't happen. So if healing is the way that we make ourselves whole, is the way we make our communities whole again, is it has to begin with our connection as pagan people, our connection to the land. I refer to this as an acknowledged kinship. So it's not just, yes, I'm connected to the land, yes, I'm part of the ecosystem. It's this, it is the thought that in addition to loving the biosphere that you're in and the particular ecosystem that you are a part of, in addition to that, it is acknowledging that you are family, that the trees and the soil and the animals and then the discarnate energy spirits that we are now perceiving and feeling so clearly, that all of that is part of this extraordinary, again, interlocking, interwoven family. I often use the image of a basket because we have here in this area, we have some extraordinary basket makers, many of them Cherokee, who have created not only practical things to carry other things, but they've created works of art that honor not only themselves and the materials that they work with, but honor their culture and their ancestors. And with that being said, I want you, wherever you are, to get yourself grounded. Go ahead and press your heels into the floor and do whatever it is you do to get grounded. Take a nice, deep, cleansing breath. And I want you to remember for a moment the people who were on the land you were on before you were there. And for some of us, that was generations of settlers that had come out primarily out of Europe. For some of us, that is also including enslaved people, primarily from Africa. And before that, the footsteps on this land belong to the indigenous people of this continent. So pull yourself back through your own DNA, through your own soil related epigenetics. Pull yourself back into those places and remember that we are all part of that acknowledged kinship. And because of that, when one of us is ill or one group of us is ill, when one group of us is mistreated, all of us are. So another deep breath as we acknowledge those beings, those people, those animals, your ancestors, and now think forward to your descendants and pull all of our families in together into these interlocking rings. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Appalachian culture. Now, I'm in the southern highlands of Appalachia when the mountains started shifting and moving, when the tectonic plates slammed together. The mountains were formed here. I live in some of the oldest mountains in the world that are above water. Very old mountains, and the energy here is old and deep, and the thrum of it is like distant drum beats. If you could see out the window behind me, you would look down on the French Broad River, which is, by some accounts, the third oldest river in the world. And it flows north, just like its older sister, the Nile. So, ensconced in this place where there is so much that is old and settled and tended, it is easier perhaps to get to the grounding state I'm asking you to be in. These mountains hold some of the most biologically diverse land in the world. This part of the country doesn't have coal. We have some jewels. There is mining here for emeralds and rubies and aquamarines as big as you are. We don't have coal. And so as a result of that, twice in the past 150 years, all of the trees have been stripped from the land. So that if you come here now, you will see some examples of very old trees, but all of that was removed. And because our soil is thin, we have learned after generations, after decades and centuries, we have learned the ways of this land and how to tend it and how to be present with it. So I'm going to give you some ideas of some of the herbal remedies that we use here in Appalachia. It's always going to come with a story because I'm a storyteller at heart. So forgive me if I go down a rabbit hole or two and drag you all with me. We have a beautiful flower here that comes up early in the spring called bloodroot. And bloodroot has a pure white flower, small, few petals. It's a tonic to see it first thing. But underneath the ground, beneath the soil, the thing that from which this flower erupts is a little tuber that is blood red. And the quality of this tuber is such that a tincture made from that root will help remove warts and moles and skin tags, skin eruptions, we call them. And the way I came to this personally was through my daughter. So my daughter had warts. And my backstory on that is that my grandmother and her sisters all had these different interesting abilities. Now, I come from a Scots-Irish family, Scots-Irish on one side and Irish and English on the other. And these sisters had interesting abilities. One of them had the ability to rub a wart away. So she would imagine that there's a wart on your hand. She would take your hand and she would hold it and she would just rub it with her thumb. And the whole time she would be saying something like, I don't know why people come to me to have this done. I don't really have any kind of authority over this, but it sure is good to see you. How's your mama doing? Did that place on her leg heal up? So my great aunt would have this whole conversation with you, and you would go away feeling loved and loved up, as we say. And 3 days later, the wart would fall off. So we don't know if there was something in the chemistry of the oil of her skin that affected the virus that caused that wart. We don't know scientifically what that did, but we know anecdotally that that was true. People would come from all sorts of places to have her rub their wart. Now, apparently warts were a very big thing because there are many, many Appalachian cures for warts. I'm gonna back up to springtime and talk about some of the tonics that we do first thing in the spring. But I'm first going to say this about my folk practice, and that is it has come to be called outside of this region. It has come to be called granny magic, and I want to disabuse you of that notion. It's really not called anything at all. So traditional healers and folk magicians don't usually have a name for what they do. They don't have a name for their practice because what they're doing is healing. And so they don't have a particular title. Though sometimes up here, a person who was known for that kind of healing might be called a yarb doctor, and that's YARB. And it is an old-fashioned word for herb. There you go. I just put that in the chat. So they might be called a yarb doctor. They might be called an herb woman. They might be called, well, mostly they were just called by their names. And the craft itself didn't really have a name. It was just what people in the community called it. I'm sorry, I'm getting all involved down in this chat and I need to step back away from it because it's just going to mess me up. There we go. So within a community, and generally that community was a cove, or a small town sometimes, there were people who had specific abilities, who did specific things. So there would be someone who, as they put it, would cotch babies, and that was the midwife of the area. And they were almost always, I've never heard of a male midwife. They were almost always women. And where I grew up, the the people who were water witches, who were dowsers, were almost always men. And I know that varies from place to place in Appalachia. And I do need to tell you that Appalachia is very different throughout. It's a big region. So the folks that are in northern Alabama, they do things a little differently than we do, and the folks in Pennsylvania do things a little bit differently. And it runs all the way up the Appalachian Mountains into Canada. So it varies according to who your family is and where you live and what the main influences were. Because most of this information does get passed down through families rather than written down, as it were. I was invited up to Pittsburgh to do their pagan pride about 4 years ago. And when I arrived there, they hugged my neck and they wanted to make sure I understood that they were Appalachian too. They were also lived in Appalachia. Now down here we always say Appalachian and Appalachia, and we're a little judgmental if you don't say it that way. So it was good for me to open up and to remind myself how big this region is and all the kinds of people who are in it, who make up who it is. So we are well known for spring tonics. And if you consider that this comes out of a culture that where the winters are hard and you have to preserve most everything you're going to eat, you certainly are not going to be able to go to the grocery store and buy anything at all as we do now. And there's some people who to this day insist on growing their own gardens and preserving their own food. And I'm one of those people when I can be. So imagine that you have lived all winter long on food that has been preserved through canning, which is going to require a lot of sugar usually, or a lot of salt as preservatives. You have survived on meat that has probably been salt cured and smoked. And so when spring comes, the idea of eating something fresh and green or drinking it or having it as a tincture or a tea becomes a beautiful and wonderful prospect of healing, whether the greens actually do you much good at all. So we're known for the notion of spring tonics. And there's some plants, and you will have to let me know in the chat. You'll have to let me know if they are where you are too. But one that I especially love is chickweed. And that's a lovely, low to the ground, perennial green that tastes like corn silk smells. And it makes a wonderful tonic. It makes a wonderful tincture. You can eat it out of hand I squeeze a little bit of olive oil on it and eat it that way. It's wonderful stuff. It is good for your liver. It is good for your kidneys. Many of the things I'm going to mention as far as spring tonics are blood toners. And by blood toners, it means they mostly affect your liver and clean that out from all the toxins you have ingested over the winter. There is a thing that grows here that's a member of the onion family called ramps, and ramps are a wild bulbous herb. The leaves are consumed, as are the bulbs themselves, and they are eaten raw, and they are also sauteed and cooked in any number of ways. They are most often foraged and wildcrafted now, and with the renewed, oh, thank you. Yeah, Colorado has chickweed. Excellent. Um, and with the renewed interest in foraging and wildcrafting, a lot of things are being overly harvested. So we need to be very careful about all those things. We we have all these things like kudzu, and I hope to God y'all aren't anywhere with kudzu. Those of you who are in West Virginia have got to deal with it. There are things that we need to eat up because they are just covering us up. And kudzu is one of them, which is an invasive plant, which is also edible. Um, this is not a, a class on invasive plants, or I would have you eating all kinds of things that might surprise you to eat. So ramps are delicious, and if you get a chance, have those. Um, I am a big fan of stinging nettle, and I make that as a tea. Oh yeah, good. I'm glad you all didn't have any up there. Nettles, indeed. I am. I pick them young, and I pick them as long as they are young. And when they start to smell like cat pee, is when I stop harvesting nettles. But honestly, you can cut them all the way down when they start to bloom. That's when they start to smell like that. You can cut them all the way down, and they'll come back. Nettle is so good. It makes a wonderful pesto. It is called stinging nettle for a reason, though, because it's got these tiny little hairs on it that will stick you good. So if you are harvesting stinging nettles, you can choose to harvest them with your bare hand. Some people do that because the stings are also, they have some efficacy against arthritis and other kind of joint pains. But I use rose gauntlets for any of you who are rose growers. They are leather gloves that come all the way to the elbow. And yeah, I can harvest a lot of nettles without getting too much sting from that. Um, Plantain, creasy green. Oh, listen to y'all. What am I even talking to you about that? You know all that stuff. Dandelions are an extraordinary food. Um, Root, flower, all of it. Yum, yum, yum. That people either pay money or they put poison on their yard to get rid of dandelions is always seems pretty much a sin to me because they're so good to eat. Candy is mentioned in plantain, and I want to talk about that too. Plantain, there are two different varieties here. One is broadleaf plantain, and the other one's narrow leaf. And the family of that is plantago, and it is wonderful for stings and bites from insects. You just chew up a leaf in your mouth, spit it out, and put it on the affected area. It takes the itch and the sting away, and it also begins the healing. Traditionally in Appalachian culture, they also used fresh tobacco for that because people often would have a pouch of chewing tobacco with them. Um, Candy's also talking about creasy greens and poke. Yeah, all that, all those spring plants, wherever you are in the country, wherever you are in the world, getting a good plant guide or better to take a plant walk with a certified herbalist or a knowledgeable herbalist is going to do so much for you because you're going to find all those little fussy little things that you see and you don't know what they're good for, or that you might be tempted to pull out of your garden or your yard. And you're going to find out how very valuable they are and how being in this acknowledged kinship with them means that you can have the symbiotic relationship of growing something like dandelion in your yard and being able to harvest the flowers and the leaves and some root and then continue to grow it for its continued existence and your continued good health. Um, okay, I'm going to do my, here it goes, elderberry evangelist. So the caveat for that right now is that there is some debate, and by some debate, I will say it's like every other debate in the internet. It is vicious and prolonged, and people get all up in it about the use of elderberry tincture with SARS-CoV. Initially, we were all told, those of us who are big elderberry users, we were all told that it was contraindicated for COVID-19 because it could lead to all sorts of complications. Well, then another group of herbalists came up and said, no, no, we've used it against COVID viruses before, and it's perfectly fine. So there is still a raging debate about that. And because there is a debate, I, at this point, do not recommend using elderberry tincture or syrup with any of the COVIDs, so 19 or anything else that may come up. And it hurts me to do that because we have used elderberry now. I've been preaching about it for probably 25 years. Elderberry, and I use it as a tincture. Elderberry tincture has studies, scientific studies behind it to show how useful it is against influenza and the common cold. But we have used it against several other things over the course of those years for which there has not yet been a scientific study. But you can look at those studies online. And again, there is some controversy about that the studies did not include enough examples to make them truly valuable. But again, as a folklorist, I will tell you that elderberry, in my experience with people who have shared their experience, will knock down influenza from a 2 week contagion to about 3 or 4 days. Still doesn't mean you should get out and about because your body needs to rest, but it's a remarkable thing. But again, so you can get involved with the studies about doing it or not doing it. Um, but it's one of my favorite things. And right now, I've got 2 gallons of elderberry tincture that I've made from the elderberry plants in my backyard. I want to talk. Let me check my time. I want to talk briefly because we are a magical group as well as as an herbal group. I want to talk a little bit about 3 herbs that I use often, and to show you how working with these herbs has given us some new ideas about how to use them. And those 3 things I want to talk about are rue, vervain, and mugwort. And I'm going to start with rue. And um, I have here a jar of rue oil that I put down in July of this year. And rue I use magically as rocket fuel. It is good for any kind of spell work that you're doing. If you're doing candle magic, it's wonderful to dress a candle with. You can use it. You can use it in any sort of working to kind of give it an extra oomph. But I want to tell you this about rue. Rue can cause contact dermatitis. So if you have never used the rue plant, here's a couple of caveats for you. One is the contact dermatitis. It can cause your skin to blister and peel. So wear gloves when you harvest it and work with it, unless you know that you're okay with it. And the other thing that rue is an acknowledged abortifacient. So if you are pregnant, thinking of becoming pregnant, might possibly be pregnant, any of that, do not handle rue. And I wouldn't even handle it with gloves. I'd stay the hell away from it. It's a powerful, powerful plant ally. And the things that it is very good for, it is very, very good for. But it also has these other properties. And for those of you who are used to handling poison plants, which is very popular in pagan culture right now, just handle rue as you would handle any poison and use it accordingly. I want to move on to vervain and mugwort because those two, the properties of those have been very, very interesting. Now, vervain and neither is rue native to my area, so they have all been imported from somewhere else. The vervain, well, let me go back to rue. The botanical name of rue is Ruta graveolens. The vervain that I use is Verbena hastata, which is the blue vervain. Vervain is a fascinating plant. It's been traditionally used for weather work. And some of you who've had classes before, I'm glad you didn't either blister from rue, because some people get really chewed up with it. So years ago, I heard about this weather working spell that I understood at the time was from Cornwall. I have since talked to some Cornish witches who say it's not something they'd ever heard of. So I'm not going to teach it as a Cornish spell, but I know it's a weather working spell that works. And, and actually, y'all might want to start this right now. So you take a half of an eggshell and you put it in your soft hand, which in Appalachian culture, we talk about your strong hand is your dominant hand, and your soft hand is your non dominant hand. So you put that eggshell in the palm up of your soft hand, and in it you put some alcohol. We assumed it would have been hard cider or scrumpy, which is a native Cornish cider in it, spit in it, and then in it also goes some vervain. Then you put the thumb of your strong hand in it, and you wind the eggshell counterclockwise, anti-clockwise, widdershins, and you wind it. Now there probably at some point were words that were said to go along with it. I do not know what those words are, but I know the first time I was teaching about this was at Pagan Unity Festival in Tennessee. And I didn't have any of the props. I was just gesturing how you did all this. And the people right in front of me, their eyes got really big. And I thought, oh, I got them. They're really paying attention. This is great. And then about that time, we felt the barometric pressure shift. And what I didn't know is that behind me had risen a bank of black storm clouds, and they came flying out over the festival, wind, rain. So I was not very popular at that festival that year for the rest of the afternoon. And then I've done it two other times, once in Pittsburgh and once in Memphis, where just the miming of this spell brought rain. So Kai, winding means you stick your thumb into it like this, and then you turn the eggshell like this. So you wind it like that. Does that make sense? Okay. I'll wait and see if that does make sense. Um, and so I have used that again and again to bring rain. And I am sorry, I am just now thinking of this. I would have put this out a month ago on the internet. So y'all go crack an egg and get started on it if you're on the West Coast. Because if you got rain coming soon, maybe it'll come. And I swear to you right now, outside it just got dark. So obviously the clouds are coming in for our afternoon rain now. All right, so that's vervain as a weather working herb. Here's the other thing we found about vervain though. It is a wonderful, wonderful ally for grief and brokenheartedness. Now, vervain is safe to handle, unlike rue. I've never known anybody to be allergic to it. So you can make it as a dressing or an anointing oil. And the way I make those oils is I pack a used jar, a glass jar, about 3/4 full. Don't pack it tight, make it pretty loose with whatever the plant material is. And then I fill it full of oil. I use a vegetable oil. And then you leave that for a moon cycle. Shake it up every couple of days. And then at the end of the moon cycle, like now we are moving towards dark moon. And if I laid down an oil now, I would take it out at dark moon in October, or the next dark moon, whenever that would be, and take all the green stuff out so you just have the oil. So if you can see, so I can hold that up to the light, if you can see, this rue oil has been decanted. It doesn't have any more of the green matter in it, but it's left its green mark. So the chlorophyll from the plant is still in here. So if you are dealing with, if you have a client or you yourself are dealing with prolonged grief, using vervain as an oil, either for dressing a candle or for anointing skin, can help the grief be manageable. I use fresh herbs as much as I can, but really, Tara, I use whatever I have. Like I went out to harvest some rabbit tobacco, and it was gone. To be honest, my husband had pulled it up as a weed, and I don't know where it went. So I used the dry stuff from last year. So I think the fresh brings more of the vitality of the plant than the dried does. But frankly, I use whatever it is I can lay my hands on. Um, so that's another use for vervain. It is helpful for all of us in this time where grief is so abundant. And we just had the anniversary of 9/11, and with everything else going on, you may want to choose every morning to just put a little dab of vervain oil right in your palms and then rub your palms together so that your ability does making rue oil deactivate the blistering agent? No, it does not. So if you are sensitive to rue, once you have it in oil, it's not as strong as the juice from the plant, but it still has the ability to do that. So please be careful with rue oil. Um, be careful with rue or rue oil or any of its products, because if it doesn't bother you, you're going to be fine, whatever it is. But if it does bother you, if rue breaks you out, then chances are you don't want to use that with your bare hands. So if you're dressing a candle with rue oil, use a Q-tip, put the candle in the candle holder, use a Q-tip, put the rue oil on the candle, burn it all the way down if that's what your working requires. If not, if you handle the candle, handle it with a paper towel or handle it with gloves on. A lot of us now have this stash of gloves. I just bought another box of gloves. You have a stash of gloves. So just be careful with it but until you know. And sometimes the only way you know is to touch it and see what happens. But just be careful. I mean that I can't stress that enough. No, it won't eat a hole in your palm, your fingers won't fall out, you won't get Hansen's disease, but it can be really uncomfortable and itchy, and you don't want to have to be doing magic and living life while also scratching. All right, I'm gonna move on to mugwort quickly. So rue, careful, abortifacient, it can blister you. It is rocket fuel for any working you're doing. Second one is vervain. Vervain is a wonderful weather making herb. And I hope all of you now have gone to the kitchen to get an egg to go do it. Wonderful weather making herb, and it also is really good for grief and mourning. And the third one, and this is an extraordinary plant, mugwort. And mugwort is Artemisia vulgaris. It's plain mugwort. Artemisia absinthium gives us absinthe, the green fairy. The Artemisias are powerful, powerful family of plants. So Artemisia vulgaris, mugwort, has long been known as a dream tonic. You can you can drink mugwort tea. And again, let me say that mugwort, with any plant, you need to know how your body's going to react to it. Mugwort is a slight abortifacient. If you were in the early stages of pregnancy, you started drinking mugwort tea, that'd not be a good plan. So it's a mild abortifacient. I have known one person in all the years I've been teaching about mugwort who had an allergy to it. But you may, in fact, be allergic to any of the plants we're talking about. So be careful with any plant. These are living beings, and they have attributes that we may not consider. So mugwort, and I want to get this in because we're running out of time. Um, Mugwort is a wonderful dream tonic. So if you have night terrors, mugwort will bring them down and make them manageable. If you don't remember your dreams, mugwort will bring them up. You see, I popped my computer. Mugwort will bring them up so that you can remember them. It is a wonderful aid for trance work and lucid dreaming. All of that we have known for years and years and years. Yes, sagebrush is also an artemisia. Yep, yep, yep. Um, Kai, have you used that? Leave me a note if you have. I'd like to know more about that and what you've used it for. Um, so all of that we know about mugwort. I have a recipe for a wonderful light ale that is a mugwort sorghum ale that is very warming, not much alcohol, ready to drink in a couple of weeks. That's another kind of relaxing. It's a wonderful, relaxing plant. Um, the way I recommend it for dream work is that if it and it's a big weed, it's everywhere, is that you cut branches of it, stick it under your pillow, but inside the pillowcase, so that you roll around all night and release the smell. I think that way it's aromatherapeutic as far as your dreams. So you can drink mugwort tea. Again, be careful, be careful. Um, but here's the other thing we found about mugwort. So if you are with a being, and I say being because this could be an animal companion or this could be a human with whom you are sitting. If you are sagebrush gargle for sore throat, yep, yep, and magically for smoke cleansing, yeah, it's a wonderful. In fact, I do a sacred smoke that is mugwort, and we have a mint here, the pycnanthemum mint. That's the native mountain mint, mugwort mint, and rabbit tobacco, Pseudonephalium obtusifolium, that I use for sacred smoke. Um, so here's the other thing we found out about mugwort. It will it opens the veil between the worlds. So if you are sitting by the bedside of someone who is ready to make the transition from matter to spirit, this can ease the way. It opens the gate. Now, I don't know how it is where you all are because you're in a lot of different places, but we have discovered that here there is almost no veil and hasn't been for several years now. So our perception not only of ancestral spirits, but of land spirits and other spirit beings on the land is very, very clear. And there doesn't seem to be any sort of barrier between us anymore. But be that as it may, the mugwort as either a tea, or you can make a strong tea and then use it on little cotton balls and do the pulse points or maybe right under the nose and help aid that transition from this place to the next place. And so we're finding all over that these plants that we know are good for one thing, that they're good for many, many more things than we ever dreamed there would be. Um, let's see, I'm going to see if there's any questions. So these are some tools for healing, and some of those tools are traditionally Appalachian. I want to encourage all of you to create some good fire cider. There are lots of nice recipes online. I use Rosemary Gladstar's recipe. Fire cider is really good for all of the ailments that hit us during wintertime. And I think it probably would be especially good if you're out there and having to deal with the smoke and particulate matter and all that. So please, all of you, be very careful, and I know you are, and know that we will be physical healing use for mugwort. Um, Mugwort is really good on uh, like sores, stings, bites, things like that. I know that, Candy. And right offhand, I can't think of other uses for it. Um, but I know they are. I know it relaxes you. Like a lot of the artemisias, it's a relaxing thing. So if you can tolerate drinking mugwort, a cup of mugwort tea as part of your evening getting ready for bed routine will be really helpful, not only for what it does for your dreams, but also that it relaxes you. So there are so many parts of healing that are not only the physical parts of this plant does that for you, and you can use this particular modality here, but so much of it is about being made whole, and some of that is about getting your spiritual practice aligned so that you're grounded, um, and to open up to a community around you and let them in and be able to stand shoulder to shoulder and hand to hand. And it's hard for us. I like to express that sometimes the pagan communities, we really like the island of misfit toys. And sometimes we don't get along very well. But we have to know in these times that are our times, the ones that I refer to as tower time, you have to know that creating community close here and linking with a community there, all of that brings us into a place where we are stronger than the sum of our parts. Just like chain mail is links of metal, but once it's all together, it's stronger than the sum of its parts. So finding the healing modalities that work for all of us is incumbent on us. So thank you all for being here. Thanks, Julie. Thanks, everybody. And I guess my time is up, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Lawrence Lerner. Thank you all.
Byron, thank you for sharing so much wisdom. I think we could have gone all day. So much to learn. Look forward to having you back in the future and in person someday.
Oh, I would love that so much.
Just what a day. We have one more hour of speakers. Everything will be, well, most things will be available for replay either on Facebook or YouTube, and everybody will have them to share. I've dropped a link for the rest of the schedule in, and please vote. All pagans vote. We have a link in here to your local polling places. Please make sure you're registered. I wish you all Gra'agach Benafki, love and blessings from the Morgan, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you all.